There are times when people are not pushed to the edge simply because they have run out of money, but because their opponent understands their weaknesses far too well. And in this latest Emmerdale storyline, Joe Tate proves that in a cold and frightening way, as he steadily forces Cain Dingle to sell the remaining half of Butler's farm while Moira is still behind bars, completely unaware of what is happening outside. Before this, Joe had already shown no hesitation in pressuring Robert and Victoria Sugden into selling their share of the land. But clearly, his real objective never stopped there. The person Joe truly wants to break is Cain. And what makes the situation even more intense is that Cain is in no position to fight back properly right now. He is short of money, overwhelmed, and secretly carrying a prostate cancer diagnosis that only Sarah knows about. Moira, the person who should have been his greatest source of support, still knows nothing. That detail, to me, is what makes Cain such a tragic character at this point. On the outside, he is still trying to act tough, still behaving as though he can keep everything under control, but inside, he is clearly falling apart. When a man is carrying financial pressure, dealing with illness, and hiding the truth from his family all at once, he is much more likely to make reckless decisions. And that is exactly what Cain has done. In the episode that aired on March 5th, Joe begins setting his trap after suspecting that Cain was the one who stole his previous car. Instead of confronting him directly, Joe chooses a more calculated approach. He deliberately shows off his shiny new car, parks it right outside the garage, and then heads into the Woolpack for a drink as if he has nothing to worry about. But in reality, everything seems to have been carefully planned in advance. At the same time, Cain is already under pressure because Gabby Thomas has canceled her beef order from Butler's farm, and the reason behind that decision traces back to Joe's advice. That only adds to Cain's frustration. He starts thinking about stealing cars again to make ends meet, and Joe's new car becomes the first target. According to Cain's plan, Cami Hadik goes into the Woolpack and deliberately causes a scene by spilling Joe's drink to distract him. While the two of them are still arguing over who is to blame, Cain quickly steps in and takes the car keys. Everything happens very smoothly, almost too smoothly, to the point where viewers can sense that this is exactly the trap Joe has been waiting for Cain to walk into. Cain then wastes no time selling the car. But the moment he returns to the garage, he is confronted by a deeply smug Joe. This is where Joe reveals his full hand. Holding his phone, he calmly explains that his car is not just a luxury item, but is also equipped with remote tracking and a hidden camera in case of the worst. Then he shows Cain the footage, clearly proving that Cain was the one who stole it. I have to say, this is a brutally effective piece of psychological warfare. Joe does not just want to catch Cain red-handed. He wants Cain to understand that from beginning to end, he never really had a chance of winning. What makes Joe so frightening is that he never loses his temper, never appears out of control, and always remains composed. People like that are often far more dangerous because they do not act on emotion, but on calculation. Once Joe has the evidence in his hands, he immediately lays down his condition. If Cain does not want to go to prison, he must sell Moira's share of the land to Joe. Cain reacts instantly, insisting that the land is not for sale. But Joe coldly replies that perhaps it soon will be, while pointing to the video on his phone. In that moment, Cain is completely cornered. He is under too much pressure, too humiliated, and too powerless. So in the end, he punches Joe just as Dawn happens to walk by. Dawn immediately rushes over to protect her partner and wants to call the police, but Joe chooses not to escalate the situation. He says he will follow the advice Dawn gave him earlier that day and go easy on Cain this time. On the surface, that might look like Joe is showing mercy, but in my personal view, it is not kindness at all. It is Joe's way of making Cain feel psychologically indebted. He wants Cain to understand that his fate is now in Joe's hands, that Joe could destroy him at any moment, but is currently choosing to give him a chance. That kind of manipulation is even heavier than simply calling the police right away. When he is alone with Cain, Joe continues pressing on his greatest fear, his family. He tells Cain to think about his children and calm down, then offers what he calls a fair price for Cain's share of the land. This is the moment when Joe's true nature becomes most obvious. He is not just using criminal evidence to force Cain's hand. He is also wrapping that pressure in a layer of reasonableness, as if he is the one offering the best possible solution. After witnessing the exchange between the two men, Graham Foster also seeks Cain out. Although he does not agree with Joe's methods, Graham still warns Cain that Joe is completely serious and that Cain should accept defeat before it is too late. Because he knows about Cain's diagnosis, Graham also reminds him that there are more important things he needs to face, including whether he has told Moira the truth yet. This is the part that really made me feel that Cain is trapped not only in Joe's scheme, but also in his own silence. On the surface, he is fighting Joe, but deep down, he probably knows Graham is not wrong. The problem is that Cain is not ready to admit that he is becoming weaker. He is not ready to let others see him fall apart, and he is not ready to speak openly about the illness he is carrying. That is why he throws Graham out, even though those words clearly touch the exact truth he is most desperate to avoid. Before leaving, Graham gives Cain one final heavy warning. Do not dig your own grave, Cain, because once you sink deep enough, it becomes very hard to get back out. And that is probably the feeling hanging over this entire storyline. Cain is not only being trapped by Joe, but is also pushing himself further and further into crisis through his secrets, his anger, and his desperate choices. Personally, I think this storyline works so well because it does not turn Cain into a completely innocent victim, nor does it turn Joe into a simple one-dimensional villain. Cain is wrong because he chose to steal, chose to hide the truth, and chose to act out of desperation. But Joe is terrifying because he sees a man growing weaker and decides to exploit that weakness as far as possible to get what he wants. That clash between a man who is slowly losing control and another man who always wants to control everything is exactly what makes the story so suffocating and intense. And now, the biggest question is this. Will Cain keep fighting until the bitter end? Or will he eventually have to bow to Joe in order to protect his family and keep his secret hidden a little longer?